6 annoying things about Americans. This, ladies and gentlemen, is likely to be painful. For all of us. The French are as arrogant as can be. The Germans, given half a chance, will declare war on anything that moves. The Spaniards wish to do everything tomorrow, apparently. But there surely can be few peoples as superlatively irritating as the Americans. They think so highly of their constitution, but forget that everyone present at the signing was most likely chewing gum. But let's start with our list, shall we? Sports. Just about everything about American sports is ridiculous. Ice hockey is usually just a display of steroid-infused brawling, at which the Canadians are better anyway, it would appear. Car racing, meanwhile, seems to be reserved in America for people who can only drive in a straight line, or who, for one reason or another, can only ever turn left. But when it comes to America's inability to create a meaningful sport, American football is most likely the chief case in point. A man reaching between the legs of another man, who just happens to be bent over in front of him to get a good hold of the ball. This is a sport? Meanwhile, are you quite sure you are wearing enough protective gear? I mean, ice hockey players wear comparable gear, and they skate at high speed on a substance that's rock hard. Usually sports involving motorbike helmets also include motorbikes. Rugby players do not seem to feel the need for quite this much protection. Meanwhile, they also do not wear skin-tight pants, as the display of their behinds does not seem to be quite as important a part of their game. Baseball, or rounders as we call the original variant of this particular game, which is still popular with preschool children in our country, is another glorious display of American nonsense turned into some sort of professional ritual. For some reason, spitting seems to be integral to this particular so-called game. But maybe best of all, whether it is true that the original Baseball World Series was actually named after the New York World newspaper or not, it is nonetheless telling that one has clung to this particular name, despite the fact that really, outside the United States of America, only Cuba and Japan play this game to any degree of seriousness. Chances are the rest of the world simply doubt that spitting is a sport. Then there is basketball, a sport apparently invented for excessively tall people with tattoos. The scoring is so relentless and routine that people barely cheer when it actually happens. But then most of the audience is busy ordering food at any time of the game, so any display of sporting prowess is incidental to the occasion anyway. I am sorry, but this just will not do. These are not sports. The fact that hardly anyone else on the globe wants to either play or watch them should be somewhat of a hint here. But let's move on, shall we? Geography. For when it comes to the American talent to irritate beyond reason, there is also their somewhat unique grasp of geography. Nobody cares what the administrative capital of the state of Wyoming is. But it might be handy to be able to point out Saudi Arabia on the map, or Egypt, Poland, Kazakhstan, or Croatia. Now, we all know the Americans inhabit a vast country, but their country is not the world. Yet for some reason they choose to drill their youngsters at school into being able instantly to recite the capitals of New Mexico, Idaho, and Arkansas, yet completely omit to teach them anything about the countries which are home to the remaining 95.6% of the global population. Frankly, they declare war on countries much of their population cannot find on the map. Spelling. Inevitably, spelling must be mentioned here. Why should a language, which millions of British people seem perfectly able both to speak and write, need making easier to spell for people west of the Atlantic? There is a U in colour, and valour, and honour. English is just about the greatest, most universal language on earth. We took a great deal of care in crafting it, and yet somehow Americans feel the need to simplify it. In all fairness, does this need to make spelling easier say more about the language, or about Americans? And that's before you even get me started on aluminium. Self-confidence. Of course, there is also the universally appreciated American self-confidence, or loudness as the rest of us call it. It appears the average American has been raised to think he can do anything, be anything, know anything. The problem is, one cannot. However much I might want it, I cannot be the next Mozart. Talent is something you are born with, you cannot make up for it with confidence. The same is of course the case for knowledge and expertise. Saying something very loudly does not make you an expert. Confidence does not equate with competence. Swearing volubly at the person who refutes you, again, does not imbue you with any actual authority on the subject. Being ignorant of something is not in itself shameful. However, declaring at the top of your voice that you know everything there is to know about a given subject, even though you in fact know little to nothing, can prove quite wearying for anyone else in the room. The worst possible scenario there being having two Americans in the same room who disagree with each other. Their parents having drilled into both of them just how special they are, and that they can overcome anything as long as they believe in themselves, soon makes everyone else present realize just how the American Civil War started. Moreover, surprising as this might be to many Americans, reminding people that their country is a superpower and partook in the Second World War is irrelevant to most conversations. The US flag. Then we have their curious attachment to the flag of the United States of America. Not only is it ubiquitous in their country, but they have a very strange attitude towards it, as though it was some sort of holy relic, some kind of fetish. For some inexplicable reason, presidents feel themselves duty-bound to wear a flag lapel pin, as though there otherwise might be the possibility of their being confused for the president of some other country. Quite a few nations have a strong attachment to their flag. In places like France and Italy you will find them flying in a great many places. But nobody sees fit to hoist them at domestic sporting occasions and play the national anthem. After all, when Milan played Turin at football, everybody is already fully aware of being Italian. Nobody needs reminding. But maybe the strangest thing about this flag is its origin. The flag is often credited to Betsy Ross, who is said to have been the first person actually to fashion the national emblem. But whether it was Betsy Ross or not, one cannot escape the inevitable comparison with the contemporary flag used by the British East India Company, which back then would have been one of the largest corporations in existence. In fact, for the first year of independence, the US used the Grand Union flag, which is in fact hardly distinguishable from that of the East India Company. This does beg the question whether, if the USA were to be founded today, they might instead opt for some other rather recognizable corporate motif. Food. Finally, we come to food. Now, I am fully aware that, as a Briton, I am moving onto very, very thin ice here. But hear me out. It is not as though we, the British, do not have wholesome foods and dishes of our own. Roast beef, cottage pie, Cornish pasties, beef Wellington, Lancashire hot pot, and so on. But we readily acknowledge that there are superior food cultures in other age-old nations of Europe, such as Italy and France. We are fully aware that the inhabitants of these countries enjoy looking down their noses at us when it comes to food, not least as they have so little else about which to feel superior. However, at least there is just cause for pride there. Whereas America, the nation which popularized spray-on cheese and hamburgers, is an entirely different case. Supersize me is hardly a term introduced by the famous chef Escoffier. Pizza is in fact Italian, no matter how much cheese one might decide to stuff into the crust. Barbecue is something in which the Australians eclipsed them a long time ago, and Tex-Mex also does a cuisine not make. So yes, for all the snarky remarks Britons must suffer in the presence of Americans who claim some sort of culinary superiority, let me tell you, we will suffer such nonsense from the French, but please, not from the nation which has embraced monosodium glutamate as one of its main cooking ingredients. There are limits, even for Americans. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, that is all from the Cyberpass for now. Thank you very much, and goodbye.